Okay, good afternoon. This is Andrew Turner, the host of the G&T Sessions podcast, and this is episode 9. And today we have a very special guest, Mr. Philippe Guinet.
Guinet, yes.
Welcome, Philippe. How are you today?
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
So you're obviously not English, but you sounds like you're from international lands. But I think you're in the UK today. Is that right?
Yeah. I've been here, and my accent hasn't gone away. I've been here 22 years, so
wow.
I'm a South Londoner now, but
South Londoner. Okay, that's all right. So thanks for joining us today on the G&T Sessions podcast. We obviously talk about not gin and tonic, but maybe we can have a gin and tonic later. But we talk about growth and technology, and so Philippe and myself met recently, and we were talking about what the kind of journey that Philippe's been on historically, and we thought it would be really useful for the listeners to this podcast to listen to Philippe's story, and also to understand a bit more about what he's doing in the future, because he's got some really interesting stuff going on. So I suppose I'll hand over to you a brief introduction from yourself. What gets out of the bed every morning? What are you working on these days? What's your introduction? Can you share that with us?
Indeed. Thank you. Well, I've been with digital, and that's not making me any younger, but I realized that when I left uni was really the beginning of the commercial internet, around 1994 thereabout, and
oh yeah, because I suppose the actual internet was like 1989 with Tim Berners-Lee, but you kind of say when it started to be used by businesses, is that what you say?
Yes, yeah. Correct. Right. So that was really the time of marketing, brochureware, websites, and that sort of thing. But you could see it coming that there was going to be more of that, and more done with it. And incidentally, my paper at the end of uni was about how the internet was going to change marketing.
All right. Okay.
And really I had a desire to go more international at the time. By the nature of the internet being, more Anglo-Saxon than French,
did you do your university in France then?
Yes, correct. Yeah.
Okay, right. Where was that?
In Marseille.
Oh, Marseille.
Down
okay.
south.
Oh, very nice.
And I decided then to come to London. I was trying to go to the US at the time, but I just ended up coming to London and liked it here, and stayed. Now, I've gone through, my background is actually, interestingly, is more business and technology initially,
right?
By trade and by uni, but then I joined some of the big consultancies and had a training around technology. And myself, I had an interest in technology, especially for the fact that I could sense at the time that what was brochureware back then was going to be a lot more functional over time, and there was early things like a double-click network that was around tracking and sort of real-time marketing, real-time banners at the time.
Right.
And
you mean like was this with like Alta Vista? You mean things like that? You mean like right back then? Or
no. It was actually already an advertising network which was running across multiple sites.
Okay.
And was able to, from the preference from multiple sites, was logging that and was able to customize to a degree the banners they were serving on multiple sites.
Right.
So it was really those were early days of things
like the mid 90s. So that's kind of like over 20 years ago, basically 23 years ago.
Yeah, mid late 90s. Yes, those things were. And back then, I remember as well doing websites where you had to create your content management system,
right?
To do all those things, there was no real software to do that. So you put your data in databases and so on. So I got really interested by the technology and did some training around databases and object orientation and those sort of things, and then moved more into sort of the e-commerce consulting and some support as well. Which is not the thing that I enjoyed the most at the time, but I realized that it was the early days of DevOps. We were actually doing DevOps back then.
Well, it's quite funny. I was saying something the other day about that. Is that when people talk about these kind of full stack, are you a full stack developer? know we're jumping about a bit, but they go, about 20 years ago, everybody had to be a full stack developer because it was the whole thing. You couldn't like say, "Oh, I'm just a front end guy. I'm just a back end guy." It was like, it doesn't exist.
It was the same thing. Yes,
and it's quite funny. Sorry.
So yes, and that time in some sort of support management, which was actually helping development team putting application lives. So that process is the process we call today DevOps, and I was really in the cogs of it, trying to improve that part. And then I joined a company called Sapient for quite some time, which was really very much on the technology side back then.
Yeah,
and doing.
And this is like prior to Y2K, I suppose. Prior to that kind of the Y2000.
That was post 2000. Yeah.
Okay.
My time with Sapient.
So the bubble had already burst by then.
Yeah. Yeah,
one of the biggest anticlimaxes in IT history.
Indeed.
Everything's going to stop. No, it didn't.
And so then I started, working on really large sort of things like the Vodafone.co.uk sort of re-architecture, and changing the architecture. So big website. And then I moved on to more the investment banking side, which is slightly different because the big telecoms and so on, and the web was more with packages that you would configure and put, whereas the banks were more custom developed.
Yeah,
and that made me branch more into the project management in a sense, and improving the ways of working, and then I fell into the agile potion, let's say.
Right. Okay.
So now I left because I do believe that digital together with agile or changing the dynamics of consulting and essentially getting plans to reintegrate a lot of the capability. And therefore, I thought that there is something different to be done. And as a consequence, I decided to go independent now.
Right. And you're the founder of Henko.
Correct.
And what does Henko mean? Does it have some meaning to it?
So Henko, the interesting thing is
that's Henko with a H, into Henko.
Yes. And I was looking to find a name for a company, and you scratch your head for a while, and I was looking at Latin names, and then I thought, why not Japanese in a sense? Because I always had agility and software delivery is looking to get sort of being more agile means that there is a lot of the ethos of lean, but the early days of lean that actually sort of re-emerge today, and we're rediscovering it today. And lean really emerged from TPS and Japan, although Deming helped them out there. But
so you say like the Toyota production system, when
exactly,
you say TPS and Edward Deming, the grandfather of quality.
Indeed. Amongst other things, but also system thinking and constraints and those sort of things. And I do think that. So I thought, why not Japan? Because Japan has really integrated the cultural element more so than the process element. Of course, the process came with it, but it's more the culture element. And I looked at ways of saying change in Japanese, and there's plenty of ways, which probably say something about accepting change. And Kaizen was not quite something, it's too much of a common name. Henko was a way of saying change. Enkan is transformation. But Henko,
so is it it's like a mashup? Is that how you done it? It's like a mashup word. Okay.
And it sounded fine, so I thought, I like that name, so I went with it. But the idea again is around a change and change being constant in the future. And I think is how do we handle change is at the root of what I'm talking about.
Well, it's back to the classic Charles Darwin quote, isn't it? About the ability to change or embrace change is the kind of the survival of the
fittest. Yes.
Yeah, exactly. So
but it's the most adaptable is the key here, and I think and I think what's happening with digital at the moment is completely changes our approach to change. Change used to be infrequent, large, and now we are talking about making change a constant.
Yeah.
And therefore, it's more about evolution and adaptation all the time. And when we see, a lot of companies, approaching digital change and agile as a transformation, I think it means that they're not transforming in a sense, because they're approaching it in a way that is the old way of doing
with kind of traditional thinking, and they need to accept new thinking.
And change should be more through evolution, adaptation, and speed. And therefore, we should be looking at doing small change rapidly and iterating fast on that and accelerating from there. And I think that's where Henko is at this balance, where in order to do that, it's not about calling up externals that are going to deliver change for a company. It's about calling some assistants, but smaller assistants that will enable the change to be done internally.
Oh, so what you're saying is that they're kind of getting the organization or the people to own the change.
Exactly.
Yeah,
change from within, key. In a sense.
Yeah.
And that means changing from the leadership, so not inflicting change on the teams, but facilitating the leadership to drive change with the teams. So all those things are very subtle, but once you add it up, you realize that these changes, this turn consulting upside down.
Well, it's a bit like that. It's a bit like that thing about rather than doing it to them, it's doing it with them, or helping them to do it themselves. Yeah.
And getting them to a sustainable point where the client can carry on. So the key thing is, and that's where consulting becomes more coaching, and I'm inventing this term coachulting, and it's the idea of you have a direct.
I hope you trademarked it.
I'm applying for it right now. Actually.
Okay, you heard it here. You heard it here first on the G&T Sessions podcast.
Indeed,
the new brand #coachulting.
So the idea is really to merge and mesh the elements of consulting, where we know the kind of transformation that needs to happen. We know the main parameters, but it's not a cookie cutter template we apply. It's actually some practices, principles, ways of working that we embed within the people. And that is.
So it's like an upskill. It's like you're actually you're creating new experience and new skills effectively with the team.
Correct, and new behaviors as well.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And once you and especially this is very hard for leadership, because when you start and what digital is actually requiring is, because we need more speed. That means we need a closer relationship between the people doing the work and actually the end client, and we need to integrate that into a value stream. And that's where we tend to look at an orthogonal alignment to much of the traditional alignment of companies today, which have been sort of functionally organized, and now we're looking to organize more on a transversal element of getting the work done, really. And as a consequence, this is a major change, absolutely major change, where it's not driving from cost, it's driving from value. It's not a functional organization and dependencies, actually reducing the dependencies. It's not large team with a scale element where we're going to save costs through the scale. It's actually small team delivering value all the time. All those sort of reference.
That's fundamental shift, isn't it?
Or shifting, yes.
So so you mentioned in your introduction that you didn't have a technology background, but what kind of functional specialization did you have when you started? What was your path, I suppose? Because part of your, you think about the G&T is like growth and technology. Yeah. So on your personal growth plan, it sounds like you kind of, were you going to be an accountant? Were you going to be a lawyer? Were you going to be a chief marketing officer? What was your path before you got exposed to this technology stuff?
I was probably more on the marketing side initially. Yes, marketing and international sort of trade.
Okay. Right.
That was what I was sort of trained about. Yes,
that's what you did through your kind of education.
Those were the majors. Yeah, but on the other hand, we had computers back then, so every student had a laptop, and
Right.
we were hacking everything we could from the laptop. I was also the computer assistant
Right.
as a sort of evening type job during my studies, and that got me closer to computing and closer to all this.
Because what you're saying is that because of the kind of, it's the point you started about your discussion about the websites piece and about that kind of that storefront, yeah?
Mm-hmm.
As people started to realize what they could do with the internet, what they could do with the web. And I presume that, because usually that kind of links to marketing and generating demand for products and services, sales,
Correct.
e-commerce. So I presume that's where, because, I remember, when I was, in the late 90s, when I was at GE and then I was at SAP myself, yeah?
Mm-hmm.
There was this big explosion of how do you make ERP systems, yeah? Enterprise resource planning systems connect to the internet. I remember there was a release of SAP that we hooray! We've released, we can connect to the internet, we can trade on the internet. I was thinking, right, okay. When you think about it now, it seems a bit weird, but at the time it was like celebration. And then obviously I got involved with a US company called Idea Integration, idea.com, which you may have heard. I ran Europe for a while for them. And that was basically, we were competing, I think, actually against Sapient, Scient, Viant, Razorfish. Remember those kind of that cohort of companies, which I presume, it was like it was basically when you had any name, you had to put an E in front of it. It was like e-business. Remember that one?
Yeah,
it was like, yeah. So that was kind of right. Sounds like sim kind of time when you were doing your transition into kind of like a more of a technology kind of role. Is that right? And using your business background into technology. Yeah.
Indeed, and I think today I'm a very big supporter and believer that change starts with Kaizen, and Kaizen being continuous improvement.
Right.
And continuous improvement is down to taking an interest about the work, mm-hmm. understanding how it functions, and figuring continuously ways of improving it. And today, it is something that is missing. If you go at the roots of the Toyota production system, that's what it's based on, essentially.
Yeah.
It's continuously finding a way of improving the product and improving the process.
Yeah.
And the leaders in that type of system of work are trained, and the first job they do when they take a job is they go on the production chain and they take notes about everything.
Yeah, they go on the shop floor. Yeah, indeed. The observations. Yeah.
Now, the trouble we have in IT is it's not as evident to have a shop floor. It's not a physical shop floor. We have a place where people work, but all the information is virtual.
Yeah.
So there is a need to surface the information, and there is a need to actually understand the quality of what's being delivered, whether it actually answers the client needs, and there are some ways of creating data points that allow that to surface. But very often also we need to understand how we create those data points, also a reason for gaming the data points. So it's down to the fundamentals of getting on the shop floor, discussing with the teams, elevating information that we get in the systems to understand the performance of our process and the performance of the quality and the performance of the outcomes with the customers. Those things are fundamentals. And I think
you're saying
myself.
You're saying that because I suppose the analogy is the factory analogy, yeah. So in Toyota, they obviously had some very progressive techniques, and I saw this in Tesco when I was there about how you make it very visual management, as we used to call it, as it's called, yeah. And I suppose then there's the measurement piece around the Six Sigma stuff, which I know people have a different view on, whether you can measure it to death. But the thing, I suppose, in the software analogy or the software factory analogy, I suppose this links back to the Mark Andreessen quote. Software's eating the world. Every company's a software company, or it's evolving like that. Are you seeing kind of on the kind of the T, the T in the G&T? Are you seeing a gap? Because it sounds like you're interacting with executive leaders in different organizations, and how much are they aware of that? Because it sounds like there's an education gap. Is there a gap in their knowledge, and is there a gap in their visual management of how they're running this software factory?
I do think so, and I think software is not quite a factory as well, because there is indeed a set process and kind of a set machine to produce software, but software is not like a production chain. Software is, there are some patterns, but it's not like assembling a pattern that is always the same. That pattern is designed every time. So the design process and the assembly process effectively get merged together, which create a lot more viability. And I think when people hear that, automatically they connect to Six Sigma and measurements and so on. And Toyota Production System was not about that at all. The root of the essence of it at the start was really about getting to talk with people and figuring out how to improve things. And yes,
so what you're saying, it's very qualitative rather than quantitative.
Yes, and it was based on relations, and it was based on
team,
teams, and it was based on the leadership not controlling, but the leadership enabling. So all those things are subtle, but as you add them up, it's actually fairly polar opposite to what Six Sigma was. And today, we tend to relate the whole lean heritage at Six Sigma, but the reality is that we don't dig further down, and the further away you dig at the source and the roots of TPS, the more you realize that what was at the roots of TPS is what we're trying to achieve again with Agile in terms of leadership.
Yeah, but I think this links into a conversation that we had the other day about the kind of the leadership DNA, of some organizations, and the mental or the mental model, of what of credits and debits, accountancy and things like that, about how sometimes, unfortunately, we're in a place where, I suppose that classic quote, measure what matters and all that kind of stuff, and people have taken it to the extreme where they try and measure everything, But actually, what you're raising is that whole leadership paradigm shift of actually trusting the team, self-empowered teams, actually driving understanding what really is going on at the coal face, with the customer or with the actual manufacturing process, whether that's manufacturing software or manufacturing automotive vehicles, and then work out, to your point, the continuous improvement agenda, where I'm noticing that a lot of companies are they jump on this transformation agenda, we've got this big program that we're going to spend zillions and billions of dollars on, but actually does it ever actually deliver anything? Because it's so big, can the organization consume it? So you can make changes too big, and then at the other end, just as you're highlighting, you could see actually small incremental changes to get the value back in the process or in the operating model. And so it's how do you do both? You got to do step change, but you've also got to do continuous improvement.
But unless you do continuous improvement well, step change is very difficult to do well as well. And I think what we've seen is that the IT leadership, through the construct of projects and the fact that much is run from projects in IT, I've turned really into sort of project accountants, really.
Right.
So what we're doing is
like a budget and a start and a middle and an end.
It's a budget, and it's also relatively short term. It's transitional. So there isn't necessarily, and I've been on many projects where we see the pressure of the deadline. But the deadline overtakes the quality we're producing, the compromise we're making. Very often we even see that the business case that was built on decommissioning a system, there is no time to decommission that system. So the business case falls apart. And by that pressure on the deadlines and the budgets and so on, we're not building an IT that is sustainable. We're not building a foundation that is actually supporting a business for digital. We a lot of cracks into that foundation. And
so just a quick question on that, though. Because that's a big, you're raising a big issue there, or a big topic of discussion, because that thing about, I remember we've all probably experienced situations where a date comes out of a board meeting. Yeah. There's no planning being done. It's just we've got to get it done by this date. Yeah. It's like a dictate, or it's like some kind of aspirational desired date. But then managing expectation of the board, or what needs to be done by that day, it all gets a bit difficult. So that's, you're raising quite a big mindset change, yeah, in at the top table to actually get, and actually there's going to be that thing where it's not black and white, it's not all known, and you go into kind of a grey area. That's quite a big jump for some people.
Yes, and along the way, because a lot of the people have defined themselves around their ability to predict a date and deliver to it. But that date is arbitrary anyway.
That's like the badge of honor. Yeah.
Yes. And at the end of the day, through the process, you realize that some things have no value, and you will discover things that have value and more value than you were set to deliver. So you need to be able to adjust course of action. Mm. And sometimes...
Well, it's that, I used to call it this kind of triangle of scope, time, and quality, or the Bermuda Triangle of project or change definition. Because you want to have a high quality, you want to have a decent amount, a scope that's big enough to be valuable, yeah. And then you've got the time dimension, and what do you do with it? And it's like how do you what's fixed and what's variable? What can move out, what can move, what's stuck, or what's fixed. And it's those trade-offs, I think, that people think about or should think about.
Also, all this is purely arbitrary. It's purely arbitrary on the basis that some people made some commitment for higher level speculation of value versus a speculation of cost. And then, the world has to order behind that.
You see, so what you're saying is that framing of, if I deliver this particular chunk of perceived value by this date, then I'll get a badge.
Yes.
Yeah.
And
gamification.
But what happens, what people don't see that happens underneath is that the date becomes now essential. The quality is optional because it's compromised. Yeah. If let's say we have an MVP, so minimal viable product, that can be achieved in half the time or a third of the time, and that is actually enough. We don't need to iterate more. We don't need to polish this more. This is enough for the need.
But then you see what you're...
You think that the person will release the people and will release the budget? No, they don't.
Yeah, but what you're raising, it raises a very big question mark around the leadership of those kind of situations where you're starting to compromise on quality for the timeline, then you get into really, really quite a dangerous area then. But, I think we've probably all seen it, and we won't be the last piece of change that's made those trade-offs. I think what sounds like what your mission is with Henko, maybe this is your dream or your ambition is to address these types of topic and change the thinking. Is that where you're going with your journey with Henko?
Absolutely, in a sense that those are, when we talk about agile, we're talking about an operating model that we try to commodify on top of that, thinking it's going to solve those sort of issues. And at the end of the day, it doesn't. And what we really need to do is address those sort of issues, address those hard things that are compromising the future of digital and the foundations of digital for companies. And I think the fact that we're thinking in projects instead of a continuous journey or where we're going to evolve the product, very often what that means is we don't do continuous improvement because it doesn't matter. We have a deadline. After that, it's somebody else's problem. So
I don't know if you know, do you know Alan Kelly?
Yes, I know Alan.
Yes, I was with him last week at the British Computer Society, and he did a presentation about agile contracts, which is very interesting. But he just brought out a book, obviously, you've probably seen his book, Continuous
No
Digital.
Estimate and No Projects.
Yeah, no project. Hashtag no projects. And he said that the amount of discussion it's creating is being quite big.
It's a passionate debate. Every time on some forums you discuss no estimate. So no project is a step further, but no estimate. People are very passionate, sort of discussions for it and against it. And you see the traditional mindset saying, how can you give a blank check to people and so on? No estimate is not about that. No estimate is actually to appreciate that we elevate the uncertainty to the leadership.
Yeah.
And the guarantee that the teams have to bring to the leadership is when they work in the most efficient fashion. So you kind of bringing the concept of flow and production chain almost,
right,
where you optimize your flow and you remove all the constraints of your flow so that the teams are as effective as possible. How many cars come at the end of it is not the team's problem. The team's problem is that the quality of the cars that come out of it should be as good as anything.
Yeah.
There shouldn't be defects. And they should produce that quality. How many cars is a matter for management. And I think the concept of no estimates is applying those sort of thinking to IT in the sense that if you get the most valuable thing to work on all the time, then why do you need estimates? Because you're working at the best possible pace towards the most valuable thing. So it's turning completely upside down all the concept, and it's very hard for people to understand that.
Yeah.
But that's the fundamental of what we're talking about. That's the fundamental of digital leadership, is to understand why flipping those things upside down or actually creating a better foundation for delivering digital.
So if I jump back on the G in the G&T, obviously growth, has got, in my experience, two dimensions to it. It's got a kind of a personal growth story. It's got a business growth story. It sounds like on the business growth story, you can come to that in a second, but on your personal growth story, is there anything you can share with the audience about, your, what I would call your peaks and valleys? What are the, any ones you would like to share about, what were your highs that you've had in the last couple of decades, and what were the valleys that you had that you think helped you to learn and readjust what you did, as in how you grow as a person? Anything you want to share on that?
Yes, and I think I won't go as far as a few decades. I think I picked up something that was really a growth. Okay. And I wish I'd started a search engine 20 years ago or something, but I wasn't. I think I've been trying to figure what is the sort of big shift in the market. And when I worked for a company like Sapient a long time back, they built themselves on the back of fixed price.
Okay.
And fixed price offering, they had a way of calculating and buffering risks and so on. That was very, very clever.
Right.
And they had also a way of delivering work. And delivering work, what they used to do is not shy away from a hard conversation and also bring people into workshops.
Right.
And sort of gather consensus through workshops and work through
get alignment, workshops. Basically. Yeah.
Creating alignment, that's what it is. And digital is all about alignment, by the way. And today, I think the concept of fixed price obviously is probably not that relevant, because everything being a continuous evolution, it's much more difficult, and fixed pricing scope falls back down into all the challenges of that we just talked about. I think change, however, has the same fundamental elements, the same elements that we need to actually create consensus and alignment. We need to go on the journey. We need to not shy away of difficult conversations. And I think I came to this conclusion last year when I decided to make a step and a jump to try and create something.
Right.
I think the consulting industry as a whole, is still after volume.
Right.
The grassroots of consulting was bringing a really top level of expertise to solve a problem. And then it grew through the years of digital, and the fact that a website, social media, and so on were bolted on the side of the enterprise, it grew as capacity to handle demand of digital demand, or digital application development.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of the consultancies have grown to be outsourcers, really.
Yeah.
And I think when you work in a consultancies, you find that you need to grow in year on year, and that can only be really achieved through volume when you're an outsourcer. And I think more and more the clients find themselves as digital is no longer bolted to the side. It's completely core to the product and service mix. And, you know, especially when you see the platform strategies and those sort of things, it is completely core. And sometimes it's even more important than the business itself. You know, we've seen, for instance, Ocado not long ago that have, you know, engineered a very, very sophisticated piece to pick up the groceries, and they were a grocery, you know, delivery business, and they engineer something really quite cool with like a air traffic management system with a massive grid that goes to the side to pick up things and then goes to the trucks. Very, very sophisticated.
What, more impressive than the Amazon one?
I think so.
Okay.
Honestly, I think so. And they are selling that now as a solution.
Yeah, it's like a wholesale solution. That's right. Yeah.
So rather than just being a grocery delivery company, they become also a software, hardware, you know, platform that they sell. And I think we're seeing that more and more from businesses. Amazon has ridden that journey, you know, from being a bookstore to what they are today.
No, but I'm gonna come back to this point though, because you've kind of, I want to say you've avoided the question or avoided the answer. But what I was trying to dig into was you touched on something about how when you were at sorry. Oh, right. Sorry. You get into it, are you?
So what I'm saying is, because it's a lot more core to the offering, that capability needs to be internalized. And if you think about, so digital needs to be more internalized, that means you need to have the leadership ability to manage it. You need to have the people to deliver it.
Right.
And with Agile as well, and the product mindset, there is a leveling of demand, because you have long-lived teams that will continue to deliver as much value as possible. So you're not thinking about peak and trough of demand.
Right. It's flow. Yeah.
It's flow.
Yeah.
So suddenly, why would you go to external suppliers that will apply a margin on top of their resources rather than having your own resources?
Right. I see. Okay.
So I think those things are basically bringing a seismic change to the consulting industry. And
so what you're saying is your epiphany moment. Are you saying you had an epiphany moment last year about you seeing this
exactly right.
This kind of this shift, and what you're saying is your mission is to basically work out how you can disrupt that.
Yes.
That continuum.
And basically it means that the larger offerers, and we see the India, large India suppliers are actually at the moment in a bit of a dead end, and they're trying to revive their business models. And I think the business model that is reviving, in my view, is that the smaller consultancy that mixes the element of coaching and the element of consulting to transform organization from within. And that is what I'm out to deliver. And my growth moment is looking at this shift in the market and actually exploiting a different. And I think the normal consulting is actually getting a bit more sort of in opposition to their client interest. So what is to shift to being in line with the client interest.
So what you're saying is that this is your kind of third eye, the third eye you've seen. Yeah. You see. I suppose that's really insightful, because I think what you spot on. I'm seeing that as well in the discussions I'm having with lots of organisations, is that there's been a period of time where people have just gone with the flow, Yeah, with the flow being a certain operating model, being a certain economic model, and they've not achieved what they wanted to achieve, so they've got to change the game. So I think you're definitely across. I think you've seen a crossroads, and I think it's what you're saying is your mission is to help organisations to jump over that new chasm and get them into that new way of operating. But I suppose what I'm going to go back to is about your, so I'll share something, right? In my life, I've had peaks and I've had valleys, right? So I've had things that have gone well and things that have not gone so well. Any things you want to share on that? Any peaks and valleys you want to share? It sounds like the bit of safety was a peak, but yes, I don't know.
It was a peak. The rest was a peak as well. Working in a
all peaks.
That became GFT was also a peak. We went. I was in charge of a large client, and that grew from about 25 people to over 300.
Wow.
Working and developing teams in Poland and having really, really good teams in Poland, engineering team. That was an absolute peak then.
Right.
And I enjoyed all of that. And actually, I left when things were still good.
Right. Okay.
And because I saw this chasm, I saw this opportunity.
So that takes bravery. That takes bravery to do that, because some people would just continue.
Indeed.
But you didn't feel comfortable doing that, so you want to just change the game again.
Yeah. And I put myself at risk. And
exactly.
And from that point, and I felt like it was the right thing to do, because unless you take risks, you don't achieve. And since then, it's been a roller coaster, to be honest.
Right.
It's been a roller coaster because this is. I've realized that there was a lot of things I wasn't necessarily ready for. There are contacts as well, and saying to people, you need to change.
Yeah.
And yes, we want to buy change, and you're too small because we want a big SI to change ourselves.
Right.
And my answer is no, you don't get me. You need to change.
Oh, you mean like they're doing it to them versus doing it with them?
Yes.
Or
when
themselves.
Your buyer doesn't really feel they have a problem,
doesn't see it. Okay.
It's very difficult.
Okay.
And indeed, it's a difficult journey always. Very difficult journey. Because, and somebody was telling me, it's tough what you do because you're effectively market making.
Yes.
And I'm seeing people starting to come around to it. But as far as finding those entry points and finding those change agents that really understand that there's no shame in accepting that you need to change yourself. And there's no shame in accepting that you need help for that.
Yeah.
And
being vulnerable and stuff like that. Yeah.
And I think I'm still trying to seek those people and those change agents, and that's the difficult part. That's a very difficult part. I've also, as part of this journey, I've also come across systemic coaching, and I put myself through a lot of coaching, sort of training, formal certifications around coaching and so on.
Yeah.
And I discovered something. Different people, open my horizon, open techniques to actually approach challenges. And now I see that as an integral part of everything I do. And I think, when people talk about managing teams, for instance, most of us do not know how to manage teams.
Right.
We manage individuals in the team, we manage tasks, but we don't manage team as a team, as an entity of its own. And now we want to flatten hierarchies. We want this Spotify model.
Yeah.
Where the Spotify model starts is the team can be autonomous.
Yeah.
It can make decisions.
Yeah.
Which means that the manager manages the team, doesn't manage the individual. Otherwise, you need layers of management. It doesn't manage a task. Otherwise, you need layers of management to do that. And you need a big hierarchy, and it's slower to move. So that is a fundamental element. The systemic management is a fundamental element of digital change. Very few people are actually realizing that. And the ones that don't necessarily have the techniques to manage the teams.
So my question on that, because you're raising some really, really fascinating topics here, and the big topics, the big, huge topics, because it applies to most organizations in the world, both commercial and non-profit. So I suppose my quick question would be, who have you seen that's actually going down that route? You know, who's the poster child that you come across that's actually truly embracing this, or has embraced it? Anybody you've come across, or are you still searching?
There is no surprise that the big giants, the big internet giants, they're managing themselves. They're born with this.
Yeah. And they don't have the backlog. They don't have the legacy.
Yeah, and they have started that way. So it's kind of an ingrained culture, and it's no surprise to see where they are today. And
so you mean like the as I would call the AGFA boys, the Apple, Google, Facebook, Amazon? Is that what you're thinking about?
But they all they have defined that, like Toyota defined TPS. They were born with it. It just
it's them. It's part of their
DNA. They
DNA.
didn't know anything else. It's part of the DNA.
Yeah.
Now, I mean, I'm not close enough. ING, for instance, the bank, said to have done a lot of good transformation, and it's a poster child for a number of people.
Yeah.
So I'm not close enough to know it inside out, because we hear a lot of stories and a lot of people claim that they changed ING. But I suspect a lot more happened inside that I don't know about, and I'd be curious to understand more. I have had the chance to visit Porsche, the manufacturer, car manufacturer, and there is a story to it, and I actually did some presentation on that people don't necessarily know about, that Porsche actually almost went bankrupt in the 90s. And what I like about their story is that it became an acquired taste. So they were not born with it. They had to actually
they did the transition, they had to transform themselves
and change.
Right.
And it's interesting when you read that story. I mean, and I got the chance to actually meet some people as well on that, where they embrace completely the culture. And they say themselves that structure, processes, and practices were the tip of the iceberg. The bottom part of the iceberg is the culture, the leadership, the
values,
the values, and they have changed like that.
Right.
Now the interesting thing is they changed because they were going to go bankrupt.
Right. So it was a compelling event. Yeah.
So there was a big event that they were back against the wall. Now, how far a company can truly change when they're not back against the wall? And that's down to the top level leadership.
Well, I was going to say it's down to leadership, isn't it? Can they, are they actually brave enough to grab the nettle, as they would call it, and do something to change the game, or not? Or do they just want to flow? But flow in the wrong way, in that they just don't change the status quo. They don't drive new ways of operating and embrace it, and that's the danger you're highlighting, I suppose.
And the way I put it is, I think the leaders, part of the digital transformation, and a large part of it, is actually to educate the leaders to digital. And as I put that into 3 categories. One is the awareness, and the awareness is understanding the contextual reality of the teams. And the best way to do this is actually what I was talking about earlier in this session about Kaizen. Working with the teams to continuously improve. It's the best way.
Yeah.
The other is they have to make time to educate themselves about digital technologies. Google, Amazon, and so on do great events, free events.
Yeah.
It's worthwhile going. And we have, if we're in a digital business, we have to make time for that, because change, gets really advertised there.
Yeah.
And we need to understand that. So they need to make time for that. Strategy, the next, to the 3, strategy is a key one. And I think it's understanding what is a digital strategy. Very often, people define a digital strategy, we're going to do a bit more, we're starting a bit more with this, and we're going to make everything slightly better. That's continuous improvement. That is not strategy. and understanding the movement in strategy. And there's a framework very, very good called Wardley Maps.
The legendary Simon Wardley. We love him to bits.
And using Wardley Maps to actually understand the landscape, the situational awareness, and then understanding movement and building strategy from that. And then getting that strategy to cascade into the team and doing this collaboratively, of course. It's not just one guy doing that, it's the teams collaborating over it.
Yeah.
So cascading the strategy in what we call Oshin Cannery. So it's the way of not cascading one way, but cascading through workshops that actually work out the problem and elevate those problems. So that cycle, and it's a continuous cycle where you merge this with lean portfolio management, for instance, to revisit what the progress you're making. And at the same time, you want to also tweak your organization. So understanding how is your organization delivering that strategy? What are the impediments? What is actually standing in the way of delivery? Okay, they're part of the team. And looking at anything that stands in the way, they're part of the team. And rebuilding your teams that way. And from virtual adjustment to the team to making organization change, that's the continuously adaptive organization. People talk about adaptive organization and they do a big bang organization change every 2 years.
Yeah.
So
rather than constantly kind of adjusting and tweaking.
So adjust to virtual team, tweak, and sort of then land it. So that's the strategy element. And lastly, I think there's the leadership element. And the leadership element is developing people and systemic management. So systemic management I talked about is, facilitating the team and managing the team, as an entity. That entity as an identity, as a personality, and the people in it, that's resilience of the team. If people leave, some other come in, the entity is slightly adjusted, but there's resilience in that.
Yeah.
So it's creating those entities and managing them as entities that are intelligent and creative and believing this. And for that, you need to develop the people, develop the leadership to understand all those things, and develop the engineers. We do not have a strong culture of engineering,
all those introverts, all those introverted engineers.
Yes. But it's a social activity. Development is a social activity, very often introverts indeed.
Yeah.
But if you go in car manufacturing, you have engineers and they're respected. If you go into construction, building, skyscraper, whatever, you have engineers. And
they're respected. Yeah.
And those are respectable professions. You go in software engineering, we don't treat those people as truly engineers.
It depends which company you're in, because when I was at WANdisco, we had a number of rock stars, as I would call it. They didn't have actual musical instruments, but they were definitely looked after. That's all I can say.
But that's also a problem. And again, flipping things, rock stars are the problem because they become a bottleneck. And we start managing rock stars as individuals. We need to manage teams.
Okay, I see your point. Okay. Yeah.
So the whole.
It's a balance, isn't it? What you say, it's a balance. You've got to how do you look after the individual contributor, but actually the team is a bigger entity. It's more important. Yeah, I understand.
And borderline, you do not look after the individual contributor anymore, except in terms of career development. But in terms of performance on the job, it is actually the team. In terms of career development, yes. Somebody that is very knowledgeable, you need to understand how they're going to stretch their knowledge, how they're going to help others, how they're going to develop soft skills. So all those elements, and you should promote the people, you should define the career stage, not based on effort, but based on skills.
Yeah.
And very often we promote based on effort. We pay bonuses based on effort.
Right, okay. Yeah.
And we create environments where the heroes become promoted. The problem with the hero is that the hero is making up for a team that is not working.
That's not performing, yes, the level you need to
be. And we keep that dysfunction because we like heroes. And we hail heroes.
Yeah.
And I think those things are very delicate subject.
Yeah.
And and very often you get to, people have a reason, a way of reasoning, and digital, the complexity of the whole system of digital change means that very often the actual right thing to do is kind of polar opposite to what people think. And that's why it's very important to educate.
I think, Philippe, you've raised in the last 50 minutes some huge topics. I think my guidance, as we spoke about before, is we need to definitely get this stuff out there, because I think there's a lot more conversation we need to have about this, because I think you're onto something here. You're definitely onto something. But I think, to your point, it's actually, there's some elephant in the room conversations that you would need to have with some very senior people in order to be the torchbearers, be the change agents that you need to have. Because it's going to need some, to get away from the navel gazing and to actually grab this opportunity with both hands.
Absolutely.
So, just a final question I got for you about today is, we talked about predictions for technology, but I think if you were going to give any takeaways for what you've learned since you came out of your last, since you founded and formed and created Henko, any final thoughts that you want to share? What would be the top 3 to 5 takeaways for people that are maybe listening to this and thinking, I'm currently in a large organization, I'm currently X, Y, Z. I feel like I want to be on a mission, and I want to change something. Like you've done, and you grabbed the nettle and you've taken the plunge of jumping in with Henko, which sounds like a fantastic mission. What would you share about that?
I think my biggest takeaway is actually that digital is not about technology, not so much about technology. It's not so much about processes, like big agile change and so on. It's about people.
Right.
We have to work with knowledge workers, and knowledge workers are typically people that know more about the details than the manager.
Yeah.
Therefore, the manager cannot be an effective test manager and doesn't want to be. The manager needs to regain capacity to do strategic thinking and participate and stimulate the team. And their role is really to unleash the potential of the team. And I think that's what I'm talking about, people. That's why I'm talking about systemic management, managing the system of work.
Yeah.
And I would encourage a lot the managers to understand how we get to manage teams. And of course, I can help with this. But managing team as entities, understanding the system of work, mapping it, understanding how to stimulate it, which means understanding the why, understanding the purpose, understanding the strategy, socializing it. The strategy is not something you do with a management team in a vacuum. It's something you socialize with the team, borderline with the client, with the externals.
It's collaborative, it's iterative. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
But I'm realizing as well, you need resources. Today, talents, a lot of businesses, again, people, a lot of businesses are not going to die for the lack of talent. They might die from the lack of resources, lack of talent, not lack of clients, lack of talents. And what we're seeing is they need to interest, they need to communicate, they need to say, come and work for us. We're a cool company. We have and talents want to work for successful companies. You need to have a good employee value proposition, you need to pay well and so on. But at the end of the day, people will take a pay cut of 20% to go and work for Google.
Yeah.
So if you want to
because they believe in the mission.
They believe in the mission. They know that they're going to get trained. They know they're going to develop their knowledge. They know that they're not going to become obsolete in a business that evolves very quickly, in the landscape, in an environment that evolves very quickly. And that's what.
I think that's the thing. I think so. My feedback to you is, I think this is why I was so interested in getting you on as a guest to the G&T Sessions podcast, because I think you definitely you've got this kind of you've synthesized all these different dimensions of what's going on in the market. And it's just the key challenge for you, I think, now is just how do you get this to be more well known, as an opportunity. So that's a great opportunity, great mission for you to have.
And helping clients on the journey, of course. I'm looking to have as many people as possible to experiment with as well. I mean, not in a bad way, It's just to understand the challenges they've got and applying those things. And I think there isn't, all this is big. It's multifaceted. It's massive.
Yeah.
And it's a simple way to change and to start with. Is start improving what you do today. Make it better tomorrow than it was yesterday.
Yeah.
And if at the grassroots you're able to get a movement to do that, then you're actually on the journey already. And the trouble is to say, oh, we're not able to do that, so we're going to do a major change, and we bring external people to change ourselves and then change everything. And that's the beginning of disaster most of the time. And I see the people that are starting, that are asking for that, and I'm not able to actually reason those people. And it's the people that are 2 years into the journey that have spent a few £1 million and that don't have much to show for it. And those people are the people that start listening. So for me, that's the audience, but I wish the other audience was actually also interested rather than going to waste quite a lot of money. So I think that's where it's at. Yeah, I think that the key thing is it's about people, and change starts small.
Yeah,
and iterate fast.
Because it's actually about, it's a new way of working, it's a new mindset. Well, thank you very much, and that's thank you very much, Philippe. That's been an amazing hours session. It's flown in time, and you've and you covered a hell of a lot of ground in that time as well. So that was Philippe Guinet, who's the founder of Henko, which is a new type of organization that I think is going to go places, because you're definitely on something. I've been in the industry for, unfortunately, longer than I care to remember. And I think you've got an interesting combination of capabilities there. So I wish you all the best in your journey.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for coming on the podcast. And obviously, we for the people who are listening to this on audio, you can't see, but actually Philippe and myself have got the same shirt on. Not actually literally the same shirt, the same design shirt. Maybe there's an omen in there somewhere. But obviously, when this actual episode comes to YouTube, then you'll be able to see us in glorious Technicolor. So thank you for joining us today on the G&T Sessions podcast. That's Philippe Guinet from Henko. Wish you all the best, and we'll be seeing you soon on another episode of the G&T Sessions podcast. Thank you, Philippe, for today.
Thank you very much.
Take care. Cheers. Bye-bye.
Cheers.